Welcome everyone, and thank you for your time today. Firstly, I would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which I live and work, the Wadawurrung people of the Kulin Nation. But I'd also like to recognise that many of you are logging in from other locations and therefore acknowledge the First Nations people of the lands on which you are also located. I would like to acknowledge that this land was never ceded and always was and always will be the land of our First Nations people. I think for many of us, our appreciation of place and community has become even more important over the past year, and therefore want to thank the First Nations people for their ongoing custodianship of the land and allowing us to now share this beautiful part of the world. Lastly, I would like to welcome all First Nations people that may have joined us here today on Zoom and pay my respects to elders past and present and emerging leaders. So just very quickly, what we're going to be talking through today. So firstly, I'm going to talk about our updated grant guidelines and the changes to our grant rounds. And then Jenny Speed is going to talk about our current grant round, the Survive and Thrive grant round, which opened this week. So firstly, some quick introductions. My name is Kerry Farrance and I'm the Head of Impact here at the Give Where You Live Foundation. And I have my team members, Jenny and Hannah, on Zoom here as well today. I should have got them to give you a wave before we put the presentation up. Jenny and Hannah are both in community impact and grant coordinator roles. Jenny is focused on the Survive and Thrive focus area, and Hannah is focused on the education and employment space. So some of the key changes that we have made with regards to our grant rounds and our grant guidelines. So many of you may have already noticed that we have consolidated some of our grant rounds to try and more closely align these directly to our theory of change. Yes, you can apply for funding in both of these grant rounds. And whilst we may have less grant rounds over the year, we have increased the maximum amount you can request up to $40,000 per grant round. We are still funding items such as equipment and small capital works and service delivery, but we're not actually asking you to specify this within your application, as ultimately this just relates to your budget. Our focus is on the outcomes that we are collectively seeking, and you just then tell us what it is that you need in order to deliver on that. We do know that for some organisations, a small grant is just what you need. So you can also still just request a small grant of up to $10,000 if that is all that you require. And we have made reporting simpler and easier for those smaller grants as well. You can request funding for multiple projects or activities within a single grant application, ensuring that you still stay within that maximum grant amount of $40,000. And we have created greater flexibility in which area your project contributes towards by no longer asking you to identify a single focus for your application. And I'll talk a little bit more about that further on in the presentation. What you will also see with shifting and separating the education and employment grants out into a separate grant round that is being held later in the year is that we are aligning our education funding in particular to a school year, and just acknowledging that for many of those programs, they deliver their programs based on their engagement with schools in our region. So hoping that that will actually make it simpler and easier as well to deliver on those projects. One of the key questions that I've been asked over the last week or so since we put the grant guidelines up is which funding round should I apply for? And we again appreciate that in a lot of cases, projects and activities can contribute to outcomes both within Survive and Thrive in education and employment. Our recommendation to you in making that decision is to really look at What is the primary goal from your project or your activity, and where does that more closely align, whether it's within the Survive and Thrive or the education and employment focus areas? But, you know, Hannah, myself and Jenny are happy to have conversations with you around where we think it might best align and be better placed to be able to receive funding. So just to note, again, we've separated our funding into two major grant rounds, the Survive and Thrive grant round, which opened this week, and the Education and Employment grant round, which will open later in the year. The exact dates around those grant rounds are now available on our website, and Jenny will talk through more specifics for the current grant round when she talks later. But just to note that the Survive and Thrive funding is primarily for delivery of work between the 1st of July and 30th of June, and the Education and Employment funding is for calendar year, so from January through to December. You might also note the little asterisk that is noted against the dates for the progress reports. That's just acknowledging within the grant guidelines that if you have only applied for a small grant, you are not required to submit a progress report and only required to submit a final report for that funding. Now, this is an area that is probably the biggest change that you will see in our grant application. And so just bear with me a little bit. I know there is a lot of text on this slide, and I'm not going to read through it dot point by dot point. But rather than asking you to select a single focus within your application, we're instead providing you with the opportunity to select which measures you would like to report on. These, of course, you will see align exactly to the grant rounds that we've just spoken about, and they are also pretty high level. So, for example, if your project is about providing food relief, we're simply asking you to report back on the number of people you have supported in accessing food relief. So they're pretty high level. We're hoping that they don't create any problems or challenges for you. Again, happy to have conversations with you around what that means for your specific project. Within the application, you will be asked to select a primary measure. Now, this primary measure needs to relate to your proposed project, and you'll only be able to select the measures that are specific to the grant round. So for the current grant round, your primary measure could only relate to those indicators or measures that you see on the screen on the left that are sitting under Survive and Thrive. You will be asked in the application to give us an indication of the number of people you believe will be supported within your proposed project. And should you be successful for funding, we would be asking you to report back on that measure as part of your reporting. In addition to that, you can then actually opt to select as many other measures that might be relevant for your program and that you might also like to report on. So here we recognise that often your project or activity might actually contribute to multiple areas. So a meals program might be just as much about providing food relief as it is about providing community connection. An education or employment program could also include elements related to building resilience. So it's in this respect that we're actually providing a little bit more opportunity and flexibility around reporting on the broader and wider outcomes that your projects and activities contribute towards. So now just some key points around eligibility criteria. And for the most part, none of this has really changed from our previous sort of eligibility criteria. We ask that so all projects that are funded through our grants must seek to address inequity and reduce vulnerability for members of our community. The projects must impact and benefit the G21 region. And within that, the G21 region is made up of the local government areas of the City of Greater Geelong, Surf Coast Shire, the Borough of Queenscliff, Golden Plains Shire and Colac Otway Shire. The grant guidelines also have a list of postcodes that fall within those LGAs. Just a small note around those postcodes. The LGA boundaries do sometimes move and postcodes sometimes drop in and out. Some postcodes cross across multiple LGAs, and there are instances of obviously new postcodes being created, noting particularly around Armstrong Creek area. So if there is a postcode that you believe is missing, please do let us know. It's actually quite hard to kind of maintain that level of data and detail, surprisingly. The tax endorsements that your organisation holds will also impact the maximum funding that you can request. And again, this aligns with previous grant rounds that we have run here at Give Where You Live. So for small grants up to and including $10,000, your organisation only needs to be endorsed as a tax concession charity and registered and up to date on the ACNC register. For the regular grants of over $10,000 up to $40,000, your organisation must be endorsed as a deductible gift recipient, item 1, as well as having TCC and be registered and up to date on the ACNC register. I might just quickly note auspicing while we're talking around eligibility. Generally speaking, Give Where You Live Foundation doesn't accept auspice applications. However, if you are wanting to discuss an exception to that, please reach out and contact, particularly with this grant round, Jennifer Speed or myself, and we can actually have a discussion about what that looks like. The questions that we are likely to ask around your auspice arrangement is to really understand what is your existing relationship with the auspice organisation and what is their relationship to the program or activities that you're seeking to deliver. And again, just some points around what we do not fund. And again, this really hasn't changed from previous funding years. So we do not fund individuals, which includes scholarship programs, political activities, religious organisations, but specifically when we're looking at funds that may be used in whole or in part to continue the organisation's religious purposes. We do not fund endowment funds, building funds, major capital works. There's a bit of a list there. I won't read them all out. We don't fund attendance at conferences or fundraising events. We don't fund sponsorship of events, clinical or medical research, retrospective or duplicated funding, or programs that seek to discriminate or create community conflicts. We also don't fund previous grant recipients who have not completed reporting and acquittal requirements. So just on that latter point, I'll just provide some additional information. If you are currently funded by the Give Where You Live Foundation through a previous grant, are on track on delivery and have met your reporting requirements that are within your current agreement, then yes, you can apply for the current grant round. What we are really asking within this is that if you have any major delays or challenges, and considering, the impact that last year had on many organisations and many projects and programs, we appreciate that it is quite possibly that's the case. What we're just asking is please reach out and just talk to us and have a chat about what's happening within your project and project and what delays you might be experiencing. The last thing that we want to do is actually exclude organisations from applying for funding. So really just asking you to reach out and have a chat with us if you are having some issues. Lastly, I'm just going to talk a little bit about our updated theory of change, which you would have also seen within the grant guidelines. It's actually not that new, and most of what was in the original theory of change still remains within this one. So in part, this has been a little bit around rebranding the theory of change, but also in part aligning the theory of change with our new strategic plan, which is still currently in development, but hopefully will be available, publicly available in the next couple of months. For those theory of change nerds like myself, I might quickly touch on a few things with regards to this and what has changed, just so that you have a little bit of visibility around where some of our thinking has moved. We have taken a much less linear approach to a theory of change within this diagram. We recognise that it is the work of community partners and other initiatives, the work that you do, that ultimately contributes towards the long-term outcomes around employment, education and life crisis. Our role, that is the role of the Give Where You Live Foundation, we have therefore tried to unpack a little bit more within this theory of change. So yes, we are funders, but we also see that we can play other roles to raise awareness, advocate and connect members of community and organisations. This updated iteration will then inform our own evaluation framework. So we can also be sure that the role we are playing and the support we are providing is actually contributing and helping. There are also two new outcome areas that some of you may have spotted. On the left there, on the pink sort of bubble, down the bottom on the left in green. These relate to supporting our people in our community to shape their own community and around supporting the social economy and community wealth building. Some of this we're actually already doing, most notably through our work within the GROW initiative. Some of this is new and areas that we are keen to progress and our own thinking and ideas around this. Some of this might inform grants later down the track, and some of this might be more about the other areas of work and the other resources we can bring to create positive change in our community. Some of you may also be aware of the innovation grant round that we used to hold. The last one was back in 2019. It is likely that these new outcome areas will be a focus of that reimagined grant round going forward. And we will be starting to look in more detail about what that might look like. So those are the major changes that we've made specifically around our grant guidelines and our grant rounds. And I'm going to pass over now to Jenny, who's going to talk more specifically around the Survive and Thrive grant round, which opens on Monday.
Jenny, before you start, can I just say a couple of things?
All right then.
Sorry, I'm just going to interrupt everyone. Hi everyone. Sorry, I unfortunately can't stay. I know lots of people on the call, but maybe not everyone. So Bill Mitten, I'm CEO at Give Where You Live. I just wanted to reiterate some stuff that Kerry said around the theory of change. It's important to us. It's really important. We've done a lot of work on this over several years now, and a lot of work in the last 6 to 9 months, I reckon, in particular to sort of iterate it. It's not new. There's lots of, it's really an iteration and sort of an advancement on our thinking. But one of the things that we know we want to do is try and have an impact and try and achieve some outcomes, and they are clearly contained. Those sorts of outcomes and the goals of the foundation are clearly contained within the theory of change, which means rather than just simply funding, which is important, and a part of our theory of change is that we continue to support the capacity of the social sector in our region. We want to support the social sector and the areas and organisations within the social sector that align to our theories of how change happens and what should happen. That's not to say that there aren't other organisations within the social sector that shouldn't be supported or should be supported by someone else. They should be, but they may not just align exactly with our theories of and the things that we're trying to achieve for the community and for the region. So my encouragement to everyone would be that when thinking about a grant application, and they're going to be competitive, I need to be really, they're always competitive, but with an increase in the amount that people can ask for by 30%. So we've gone up by $10,000. It's going to make it even more competitive, and we will, when you've got a competitive grant round, you have to sit down and think about who it is you're going to fund, why you're going to fund them, and the way we're going to do that will be through a lens of this theory of change. So I would encourage everyone to review that as much as you can, look at it, and make as many links as you possibly can to what you're doing and our theory of change. Genuine links. I think we'll see through pretend ones, but genuine links, and make it as hard for us to make a decision as possible, even though that is not something that I'm looking forward to, but nevertheless, make it as hard as you can. We want as good applications as we can, and we want to be able to, hand on heart, say that we've really gone through a good process and funded those organisations and activities that we think are going to make the most change and the most impact. And I'm going to shut up now. That was scripted and interrupted. I'm sorry, but I'm going to hand you over to Jenny. And unfortunately, I can't hang out with you guys for too much longer because I need to go and do something else. But I'll leave you in capable hands. So thanks for being here, though. It's good to see you, everyone.
Great, thanks, Bill. Thanks for that extra information and the theory of change, and it's well worth a read. And if you've got any questions, please let us know. So welcome to the Survive and Thrive Grant Round information session, and taking the time to learn more about what we're doing. I'm going to start with the key dates. If Kerry's going to be doing the button pushing, so with grant round opened on Monday, information session today. So the grant round closes at 5 p.m. on Thursday, the 29th of April. So approximately 5 weeks. Notification of the outcome will be on Friday, the 25th of June. And then the funding period, as we've noted before, is the 1st of July to 30th of June. Next one, Kerry. Yep, funding available, which Kerry has touched on, is the small grants of up to including $10,000, regular grants from $10,000 to $40,000. There are some limitations to the amount you can request. Direct purchase of food items, maximum amount available is $5,000 per application. And minor capital works and equipment purchases, the maximum amount available is $10,000 per application. So just a bit more information on the minor capital works. Capital works and equipment purchases might include, but are not limited to, the following: acquisition of equipment related to service delivery, including kitchen equipment, storage, refrigeration vehicles, minor alterations or renovations of part of a building, acquisition of furniture, fittings or equipment for a building, altering or installing furniture, fittings or equipment in a building, and acquisition of computers, printers and computer-related equipment, including software. Please note, requests for funding for direct food purchases and minor capital works and equipment can form part of a larger grant application. For example, $10,000 can be requested for equipment as part of a $40,000 application for the delivery of a project. Thanks, Kerry. So
and if we missed the slide, one around the focus area. I'm just, do you mind if I jump back?
No, it's not. Oh, where is it?
Well, I may have double clicked through on Zoom. Oh,
no.
Okay, we can talk through this and maybe we'll bring it up separately.
All right. Okay, assessment process. Applications close, as said, on the 29th of April. Eligibility checks are completed, so that's the tax endorsements and ACNC. Applications are assessed by our community review panel members. So thanks to Hannah, who's coordinating that project. So that'd be fantastic and much appreciated. that we then go into a selection, a Give Where You Live Foundation selection panel meets, where we, as the community grant review panel members, will be finding it very difficult to find and decide which ones we want to will get through to the board recommendation. So that's done just before, what's the date, Kerry? I think it's the 18th of June. And then applicants are notified for successful applications are notified of their outcome around the date, which I can't remember.
Before the 25th of June, people will be notified. So there'll be a few days there that we'll be making all those calls. And we do notify all applicants, whether you've been successful or not. So we give everyone a phone call just to advise on the outcome of their applications.
Thanks, Kerry. So assessment criteria, just getting my notes up to assess your application, we based our criteria on the following: the theory of change, and I'll go through each of these separately, community need, organisational capacity, valuation and impact, and budget and financial management. Theory of change and grant alignment. The need identified clearly aligns with the Give Where You Live theory of change and grant focus area. And the outcome impact identified clearly aligns with the Give Where You Live theory of change and grant focus area. Community need. We were asked that persuasively define a community need in the G21 region. You define a community need with evidence, example, statistics, research, data, stories. Clearly connect, application clearly connects how you want to propose to, what you propose to do will meet the need identified, and clearly relates the difference or change you will make to the need identified. Organisational capacity. Application should identify or allocate appropriately trained, experienced staff, volunteers or consultants at a level which will allow for successful implementation of the project. Identifies key partners and key roles they play in supporting the implementation of the project. Demonstrates efficient and effective organisational governance, management to ensure delivery of quality programs or services. And potential challenges and adequate mitigation strategies have been identified, including their response to the COVID-19 context. We'll move on to budget and financial management. Provides clarity about how funds will be used, provides clarity about how funds have been calculated and or provides estimates, quotes or other documentation of cost. Includes relevant in-kind allocation of resources towards the program project, and provides clarity about other funding needed and its status. So, but ultimately it's a story you tell. The need, knowing the need or the problem that you want to address, the activity or the solution that you think will meet that need, and then the difference that your project will make, the outcome. As Kerry said with the food, what's food relief, but it might meet other needs as well, other outcomes such as community connection, resilience. And finally, once we go back to that other, when we go back to the first slide, which we'll see in a minute, all material and links can be found on the Give Where You Live website. Encourage you to read the grant guidelines, particularly as we've made some changes. Make sure you're eligible. Talk to us, any questions to either Hannah, myself and Kerry, and we are able to provide feedback on previous application from last year. If you haven't got that already, encourage you to do that, and just contact myself and check our website for grants previously funded under the Survive and Thrive area to give you a sense of what we have funded previously. And the grant round closes on the 29th of April again. So Sorry about that with a couple of muck-ups, but we'll,
No, that's okay. And look, I'm just going to bring up the slide that we were talking about has actually vanished. We have moved on to a, very fantastic SharePoint site, but that also comes with its challenges sometimes. So bear with me, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to share my screen and I'll bring up the actual grant guidelines that focus specifically around Survive and Thrive, which was the same information we had available on that slide anyway. And Jenny can talk a little bit more specifically around what is it that we look at funding under the current grant round. So one.
we're doing really well.
Here we go. There's always a backup.
Always, that's right.
There's always a backup. There we go.
Okay, so the Foundation's Survive and Thrive outcome areas seek to increase support to reduce life inhabiting crises by supporting immediate basic need, so Survive, and Thrive, supporting the building of resilience and sense of belonging and acceptance as protective factors. These outcomes recognise the need to meet both immediate basic needs so people can survive and build resilience so they can thrive. And applications will be accepted in the following areas. So for Survive, food security, supporting the provision of food relief for people experiencing food insecurity, and homelessness, supporting people who are experiencing homelessness. And in the Thrive space, it's one is prevention and early intervention, supporting prevention and early intervention efforts related to family violence, sexual assault, addiction, mental health, and family breakdown. Two is a building, Kerry, can you, I'll move my, sorry, I've got to move my picture. Building resilience, supporting increased capacity and coping strategies to support resilience, and community connections through promoting community connections and reducing social isolation. So if you've got any particular questions around those building resilience of community connection, please ask us at the end, because sometimes that can be a difficult thing to address, whether it's social isolation or whether it's connection.